Q Review, print speaking to the blind, celebrating 40 years of audio newspaper production. Welcome to this week's edition of the National Podcast, recorded at the Bishop Briggs Media Centre by our amazing volunteers. You can get in touch with us via Facebook, Twitter or Instagram using @CuneReview, that is @CuandReview. You can also contact us directly by emailing information@cunereview.com. That is INFORMATION@CuandReview.com, or by calling 0141 772 3976. That's 0141 772 3976.
From the National, Friday the 28th of February 2025, from the news section. Arctic creature spotted in Firth of Forth in rare appearance. Article written by James Walker. An Arctic creature made a very rare appearance in the Firth of Forth recently. A ringed seal was seen near Skinflats Lagoons on Friday, February 15th, with the images posted on Facebook, but no subsequent sightings have been made. This animal is a wide-ranging species, and often the most common species of seal in the Arctic, but it is very rarely seen in Scotland. In fact, there have been fewer than 30 recorded sightings of the Arctic pinniped since 1900. According to the news site Bird Guides, the last was an immature male taken into care in mid-September 2021 at Cove Bay in Aberdeenshire. That article was written by James Walker. From the National, Friday the 28th of February 2025, from the Politics section. GB News total losses top £100 million since Channel's inception. Article written by Hamish Morrison. GB News's total losses have now topped £100 million, while its revenues have more than doubled in the last year. The broadcaster decreased its annual losses by a fifth in the year to May 31st, 2024, going from £42.4 million in the 2022-23 financial year to £33.4 million the subsequent year, the Press Gazette reports. Overall, the losses the broadcaster has accumulated since it began setting up ahead of its June 2021 launch now total £105.9 million. Its revenue was up 136% from £6.7 million last year to £15.8 million, and advertising revenue was up 111% to £8.9 million. Chief Executive Angelos Frangopoulos told a parliamentary committee last year, "While we have a growing audience and our advertising revenue has increased significantly, and it had to because in the early days we didn't have much, the reality is that we're looking at all aspects of monetization. We're very confident about the future of being self-sufficient financially, but we have a lot of work to do." Digital revenues were up last year by 165% to £5.8 million, while the only revenue type to fall was radio. A GB News source told Press Gazette, "As these results show, the channel is recording growth across several areas of the business, and it remains focused on its mission to become the UK's largest news channel by 2028. GB News is part of the right-wing media empire owned by hedge fund entrepreneur Paul Marshall, who also owns Unheard and The Spectator." Frangopoulos said in the company accounts that audiences were growing strongly in the last year, up 53% in the share of TV audiences and 61% for radio. Last April, the company began its first major round of redundancies, aiming to cut 40 jobs. But the official accounts showed the headcount was up from 295 to 311 in the year to May 31st, 2024. That article was written by Hamish Morrison and read to you by Elizabeth. From the National, Friday the 28th of February 2025, from the news section. Man arrested after malicious email to schools sparks Moray firearms response. Article written by Joe Scotting. Police Scotland have arrested a 19-year-old man after a malicious email sent to schools in Nairn, Old Erne, Forres and Inverness sparked a police presence. Local media reports that Anderson's Primary School, Apple Grove Primary School and Forres Academy were among the targets of a firearms threat issued by email. A Police Scotland spokesperson said, "Around 8:20 a.m. on Friday, the 28th of February 2025, officers were made aware of a malicious email sent to a number of schools in the Nairn, Oldern, Forres and Inverness area. A 19-year-old man has been arrested and inquiries are ongoing." Article written by Joe Scotting. From The National, Friday the 28th of February 2025, from the news section. More jobs to be lost at Grangemouth. Article written by Joe Scotting. More jobs are to go at Grangemouth as a knock-on effect of the closure of refinery operations. A letter was sent to staff at INEOS Olefins and Polymers UK, separate to the Petro-INEOS closure of the oil refinery on Thursday afternoon. Earlier this month, more than 400 Petro-INEOS workers found out they were being made redundant. Thursday's letter said, "The result of that will inevitably be a smaller organisation that means we will need less support services." The additional redundancies are from the 6 parts of the business directly providing utilities or services to the refinery. These include hydrocarbons, utilities, labs, IT, stores and emergency first response. INEOS Olefins and Polymers UK said the consultation process will get underway and it will try to avoid compulsory redundancies. The first tranche of job losses of around 24 will come in labs and stores, with more to follow. Unite, the union, had warned that closing the refinery would just be the start of such announcements. This follows Keir Starmer's headline announcement that the UK government will provide £200 million in funding for the future of Grangemouth. Responding to the announcement, First Minister John Swinney said he welcomed this response from the Prime Minister to my call earlier this week for the UK government to provide its fair share of support for Grangemouth. Swinney went on, "It is a step in the right direction and this funding must be made available immediately." Detailed plans for possible new jobs at Grangemouth will be published in the Project Willow report next week. The Prime Minister also told the Scottish Labour Conference that the workers at the closing oil refinery made redundant would be given 18 months' pay and offers to reskill. That article was written by Joe Scotting and read to you by Elizabeth. From The National, Friday the 28th of February 2025. From the Culture section. Pop icon Lulu to headline Scottish Island Festival this summer. Article written by John Coulter. Scottish pop legend Lulu will headline the Island Music Festival Hebcelt in July as she completes her final year of touring. The Stirlingshire-born star is best known for her chart-topping Relight My Fire with Take That, Eurovision-winning Boom Bang a Bang, James Bond theme The Man with the Golden Gun, and her debut hit Shout. Lulu will play the main stage on Friday, July the 18th. She told fans, "I'm looking forward to visiting the Outer Hebrides and performing at Hebcelt in Stornoway on the Isle of Lewis. See you in July." The festival will also feature supergroups Skerryvore, Tidelines, Nina Nesbitt, Eddie Reader, Trail West, Cassidy, Beluga Lagoon and NATI. A record 70% of the acts performing at Hebcelt this year are female-led or have female members, following the festival's pledge to Key Change, the international campaign to address gender inequality in the music industry. Hebcelt's artist programmer and director, Michelle Shields, highlighted the diversity of this year's lineup. "This year's festival truly celebrates music across generations, from trailblazers like Lulu and Eddie Reader to the next generation of stars, including Natty, Josie Duncan and Lauren Collier. Our Celtic roots are proudly represented, with Skerryvore marking their 20th year and consistently one of our most requested acts by fans, Highland Heroes Tidelines, and festival favourites like Trail West, Carla and the Tumbling Souls. We're also thrilled to spotlight talents like Lusa and Elias Alexander, alongside live sensations Beluga Lagoon, Tom Maguire and the Brassholes and Cassidy." Since 1996, Hebcelt has been a mainstay of Scotland's cultural music calendar and is on course to have helped generate more than £40 million for the local economy by the time it reaches its 30th anniversary in 2027. Creative Scotland endorsed the festival earlier this month and pledged to secure its long-term planning with a 3-year funding package. The festival will take place from July 16th to 19th in and around Stornoway on the Isle of Lewis, combining musical performances with the cultural heritage of the islands. That article was written by John Coulter and read to you by Elizabeth. From The National, Friday the 28th of February 2025, from the Politics section. We cannot allow our renewables resources to be stolen as oil was. Article written by Richard Walker. There's just one thing behind BP's remarkable decision to ditch its much-hyped focus on renewable energy, you know, the stuff that might just save the planet, and refocus on oil and gas, the stuff that destroys it. It's called greed. The last 3 years have been tough for most of us. After all, we're the ones who play by the rules, who pay our taxes and our bills. We're the ones who are constantly lied to and made to feel we have the word mugs tattooed on our foreheads. Recent years have been marked by constantly rising energy bills, while we are fed reasons for the rising costs that simply don't make sense. Like me, I'm sure you've been left scratching your head trying to work out why this is happening. Electricity bills have pretty much tripled over that time, and I'm sure you are in the same position. This April they will rise again, we're told, by around £100 a year, but that's almost certain to be a significant underestimation. Everyone you know will be in the same situation. But it's certainly not true that we are all in this together. The energy companies are not reeling from the effect of a global rise in oil and gas prices. They are doing just fine, thanks. Let's take BP as an example. In February 2023, it reported annual profits of $27.7 billion. It wasn't the only energy giant rolling in money. In the same year, Shell made a profit of $39.9 billion, double the profit the previous year, and the highest in its 115-year history. We're told the rising cost of energy is down to Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the world's determination to become less reliant on imported Russian oil. Now, you might think that such a move would be good for oil-producing countries like Scotland, but that's not how the global economy works, stupid. So we're all pushed closer to the poverty line, while billions of barrels of oil have been pumped out of the North Sea by private companies which sell it onto the open market. They and their shareholders make killing from us, and when we complain, we're ignored. But it keeps happening. In the run-up to the independence referendum in 2014, we were told that North Sea oil was running out, and that it would be catastrophic to build the economy of an independent Scotland on the shaky foundations of oil. Of course, no one was suggesting doing anything of the sort, but supporters of the Union cannot miss any opportunity to tell us that Scotland can never stand on its own feet, and they leapt onto a narrative that turned out, again, to be a lie. But even in the new age of renewable energy, Scotland has an abundance of national resources to be a world leader, but of course, this is now portrayed as wrong-headed too. In truth, there is nothing that the UK can allow to be regarded as a Scottish success story. Even Scotch whisky is fighting moves to redefine single malt to allow cheaper English whisky to be marketed as such. Now the bright future forecast for renewable energy is being ditched in a return to oil which is produced in Scotland but which brings no benefits to consumers living here. This is a good week to talk oil, as the National has once again drawn attention to the Macron report, a national scandal that hushed up the scale of the North Sea oil dividend for fear it would increase the demand for Scotland's independence. In most other countries, this would be regarded as close to criminal, but we're expected to simply shrug our shoulders and suck it up because, well, the Union. New figures were also published this week, revealing that BP and Shell profits in 2024 were more than double the UK's climate financial commitments, ironically in the same week that BP threw overboard its commitment to renewable energy. It did so because recent profits, although still astronomically high, have dipped recently, and capitalism, of course, demands that profits and growth must inexorably rise year after year. That's the ethos of the free market, which is enjoying something of a resurgence with the rise of the right in America and elsewhere. Donald Trump, responsible for a new existential drama somewhere in the world every week, is one of the driving forces behind BP's volte-face. The new president has lost no time pushing the climate crisis down the agenda and promoting a drill baby drill policy as part of a national energy emergency to speed up fossil fuel development. His supporters, particularly his mega-rich supporters, are becoming almost hysterical in promotion of the benefits of the free market. On Wednesday, Amazon founder and owner of the Washington Post, Jeff Bezos, announced the newspaper would focus on the promotion of personal liberties and the free market, and would no longer publish pieces opposing those pillars. Bezos said on Twitter, X, "Viewpoints opposing those pillars will be left to be published by others." This in direct contradiction to the whole concept of opinion sections in newspapers, which traditionally publish a wide range of opinions on matters of concern to its readers. The National, which exists to support the principle of an independent Scotland, gives space to a wide range of views within the independence movement, which are the source of considerable debate. The purpose of opinion sections is to challenge and explore different viewpoints. As a marketing campaign for the Australian news outlet Crikey says, "Don't agree with everything we publish? Good." The Washington Post's opinion editor, David Shipley, felt he had no choice but to resign after the latest policy change, which of course has been welcomed by several of the new president's allies. Elon Musk posted on social media, "Bravo at Jeff Bezos." Trump's interpretation of supporting the free market has seen him marshal disinformation against renewable energy sources. He has described wind energy as disgusting and has claimed, wrongly, that wind turbines are the main cause of whale and bird deaths. He's no more supportive of solar energy, which he has described as ridiculous. His administration has suspended, temporarily, all clean energy development on federal land. We are expected to believe that this reversal of US energy policy away from renewables in favor of fossil fuels is entirely unrelated to the financial support the oil and gas industry funneled into Trump's election campaign. The president's commitment to the free market has as much integrity as his commitment to free speech, which this week took the form of support for a sickening "What's Next, Gaza?" AI-generated video. It promotes a vision of the area as a rebuilt Riviera, complete with a huge golden Trump statue, footage of him dancing with an almost naked belly dancer, and Musk and Benjamin Netanyahu lounging on beaches. Whether Keir Starmer will stand up to the US flight from renewables with more vigour than he challenged its lunatic suggestion it buy Gaza to repatriate Palestinians remains to be seen. Until now, the Prime Minister has been closer to the European approach, which has sped up its transition to green energy sources. Wind and solar sources overtook fossil fuels in the first half of 2024. Last November, Starmer officially launched the UK-led Global Clean Power Alliance, and a month later he confirmed that the UK aims to have 95% of its electricity generation coming from renewables and nuclear sources by the end of the decade, which is a jarring combination of very good and very bad news. Scotland was already meeting 113% of Scotland's consumption of electricity by 2022, although that has not protected us from the more recent horrific energy price rises, for reasons including the price of electricity being tied to the price of gas on the open market. Someone has devised an energy pricing structure that is so complicated that it defies human understanding, but also makes sure that the consumer always pays through the nose for the worst possible deal. The Scottish solution to the whole sorry mess lies, of course, within Scottish independence, but as a national reader, you already know that. Your job, and the job of the independence movement as a whole, is to convince the majority of Scots that that is the case. Of all the many benefits independence would bring, the need to make sure we will never again be robbed of our country's national resources is close to the top. One shocking story as duplicitous as the treatment of the Macron report is surely enough. That article was written by Richard Walker and read to you by Elizabeth.
From the National, Sunday, 2nd of March 2025. From the news section. Scottish Women's Aid charity bans trans women identifying as non-binary. This article has been written by Steph Braun. The Scottish Women's Aid charity has announced it will not allow trans women or men who identify as non-binary to use its services. In opposition to the organization's umbrella body, Edinburgh Women's Aid has now stated it will prohibit trans women or men who identify as non-binary from attending its group support services or refuges, even if they hold a gender recognition certificate. It has also said it will not hire trans women or non-binary women as staff, citing exemptions in the Equality Act 2010. The domestic abuse organization is believed to have made public its internal policy position ahead of a scheduled appearance at a BBC Radio Scotland programme in March. Edinburgh Women's Aid's stance on the matter is in conflict with that of Scottish Women's Aid, which has consistently said its network of domestic abuse organisations is trans-inclusive. In a statement on Edinburgh Women's Aid's website, the charity says that while the organisation recognises the rights of women to hold and express differing beliefs in society, Edinburgh Women's Aid holds specific positions in regard to our service, provision and employment. The statement goes on to quote the Equality Act 2010 and says, "We lawfully exclude transgender women and males who have transitioned to non-binary, including those with a gender recognition certificate, in our adult group work services and in our shared refuge spaces, including our 24-hour refuge." It adds that Edinburgh Women's Aid, which has operated in the capital for more than 50 years, applies the same rule to its recruitment process. Scottish Women's Aid was a signatory of a joint letter published in 2017 as the Scottish Government sought views on the issue of self-ID during a public consultation. The letter, signed by multiple charities including and Gender Rape Crisis Scotland and Zero Tolerance, said, "We do not regard trans equality and women's equality to contradict or be in competition with each other. Rape Crisis and Women's Aid in Scotland provide trans-inclusive services on the basis of self-identification." An internal government communication sent to the presiding officer says Edinburgh Women's Aid has flagged its policy position ahead of taking part in a BBC Radio Scotland programme due to air on March 9. The Scottish Government said the needs and safety of survivors of domestic abuse must be the utmost priority of support services. The Scottish Government cannot intervene in the operational running of Edinburgh Women's Aid or any other charitable organisation. We expect all relevant organisations to comply with the requirements of the Equality Act 2010. Yes, employers' organizations may need to consider the impact of other legislation, such as the requirements of the law on health and safety in workplaces. The Scottish Government strongly supports the separate and single-sex exceptions in the Equality Act 2010, which can allow for trans people to be excluded when this is a proportionate means of achieving a legitimate aim. This is not in conflict with our support for trans rights. This article has been written by Steph Braun.
From the National, Monday the 3rd of March 2025, from the Politics section, "He should not be welcome. Scottish MP slams Donald Trump visit." Article written by Joe Scotting. A Scottish MP has called for Donald Trump's upcoming Scotland visit to be cancelled over being a hostile actor towards Ukraine. Stephen Gethin's MP for Arbroath and Broughty Ferry and SNP Foreign Affairs spokesperson took to BBC Good Morning Scotland to voice his anger over Trump's visit days after the US President's tense press conference with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Gethin told the Lucy McManus on Monday, "If the United States is hostile to Ukraine, they should not be welcome. At the moment, we have an administration in the White House which is hostile to Ukraine. We know that the Trump administration is hostile to Ukraine, and until it changes its tune, then we need to take a slightly more robust approach to that. That's disappointing given the importance of the relationship with the United States, but telling President Zelensky that he's the one that he's got to do something about this is the wrong way to look at this." He continued, "Firstly, you need a hard-headed approach, and that means Europe getting its act together. And secondly, you need to say to the United States, are you with us or not? Europe really needs to step up and do an awful lot more in terms of its own security. not least because of Russia's war of aggression in Ukraine that threatens us all. This follows Keir Starmer announcing a £1.6 billion finance deal which will allow Ukraine to buy more than 5,000 missiles following a summit of European leaders in London. Gethens continued, I think if you try and appeal to Trump's good side, it's not something that can be done for very long. I think the Prime Minister is genuinely trying to do his best for Ukraine here, but I do not think at the moment it would be appropriate to host the President given the United States' approach to Ukraine, and that is an existential war for Ukraine and therefore very significant implications for our own security in Scotland, the UK and in the rest of Europe as well. I do not think there should be a state visit if the United States is considered a hostile actor towards Ukraine. We need to pull in behind Ukraine. If you look at some of the daft excuses we are getting, the landscape was not wearing a suit. He was being disrespectful. This is a country that is in an existential conflict. You know, Elon Musk can wander in and out of the Oval Office without a suit, but not Zelensky. This was a hostile act. A petition to rescind Donald Trump's invitation for a royal visit to Scotland has gathered more than 129,000 signatures online. The campaign's author said people should sign the petition if they believe Trump is unfit to be celebrated with another state visit. The First Minister John Swinney said soldiers could be deployed in Ukraine this year in a peacekeeping role. The SNP leader backed the move in an interview on the BBC's Sunday show, where he called Donald Trump's treatment of Volodymyr Zelensky completely unacceptable. And that article was written by Joe Scotting. From the National, Monday the 3rd of March 2025, from the news section. Charity acquires £17.5 million Scottish estate bigger than Dundee. Article written by Steph Braun. A nature conservation charity has secured a Highlands estate larger than the city of Dundee, hailing it as an important milestone in tackling the climate crisis. The Scottish Wildlife Trust now owns the 7,618 hectare Inverbroom estate, following its largest ever land acquisition. The £17.5 million purchase has been made possible through a gift from a private donor, the largest donation in the Trust's 60-year history. The charity said securing the site will enable it to significantly enhance its efforts to protect and restore wildlife at a scale across Scotland. It is situated around 8 miles south of Ullapool, and the landscape is mainly peatland, ancient semi-natural woodland, farmland and numerous lochs and lochans. It was put up for sale in September, being described at the time as an outstanding opportunity for potential buyers. Trust Chief Executive Joe Pike said, not only is the purchase of Inverbroom an important milestone for the Trust, but also for Scotland's efforts to tackle the nature and climate crises. It is apt that we take ownership of the site on UN World Wildlife Day. The site includes some of Scotland's most iconic species and habitats, so we are delighted to have been able to secure it for the benefit of Scotland's wildlife and people, especially as there was also interest from overseas buyers. It has all been made possible by the incredible generosity of a private donor who is passionate about the part that Inverbroom can play in restoring our precious ecosystems while delivering benefits for local people. We are extremely grateful to the donor for helping us secure this important site, and to our former Chief Executive and current Scottish Wildlife Trust Ambassador, Johnny Hughes, who facilitated the donation. The Trust said, at 7,618 hectares, the estate is larger than the city of Dundee, which covers 6,300 hectares. Plans for the site include regenerating river woodland and temperate rainforest habitats, providing homes for creatures such as wood warblers and pine martens, and encouraging a wide range of mosses, lichens and fungi. Other ambitions include restoring peatlands and removing invasive species such as Rhododendron ponticum. The Trust has made a commitment to the donor that none of the work at the Inverbroom will be funded through the sale of carbon credits. It also plans to work alongside local farmers to promote sustainable agricultural practices that will benefit nature while maintaining a productive business model. Scott Rennick, whose family have farmed at Inverbroom for 3 generations, said, "We as a family are delighted to have the opportunity to work alongside the Scottish Wildlife Trust. Our grandfather moved to Inverbroom in 1933, so the family have had a knowledge of the land for 92 years. There is an incredible diversity of wildlife on the estate, from sea level to 3,300 feet, from seals on the shore to ptarmigan at the tops. It is exciting to be involved with a highly respected organisation who will take traditional hill farming and wildlife preservation hand in hand so that we can continue to farm at Inverbroom in such a way as to protect the natural environment. The site is bordered to the east by 2 rivers, the Broom and the Calaig, and to the south by 2 Munros, a Kelly and Sgurbrich. 2 bridges on the estate were designed by Sir John Fowler, chief engineer in the construction of the Forth Road Bridge, who once owned Inverbroom in the 19th century. An article was written by Steph Brown and read by me, Ian McKenna. From the National, Monday the 3rd of March 2025, from the news section. Scotland remains best part of UK for women in workplace. Article written by Steph Braun. Scotland has retained its status as the best part of the UK for women in the workplace, according to figures. It is ranked as the top performing region in PwC's Women in Work Index for the 2nd consecutive year, amid a national trend of stagnation in workplace gender equality. Data presented by PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC International Limited, says Scotland's performance is largely due to the narrowing of the gender pay gap and maintaining a high female labour force. The Women in Work Index assesses UK regions based on 5 key indicators: the gender pay gap, female labour force participation rate, the gap between male and female labour force participation rates, female unemployment rate, and female full-time employment rate. The figures show the gender pay gap in Scotland narrowed from 11.8% in 2022 to 8.3% in 2023. Scotland has the lowest participation rate gap in the UK for 2023, sitting at 5.1%, despite a slight deterioration from 4.4% in 2022, the report said. In terms of labour market strength, the figures show Scotland's female unemployment rate is currently at 3.1%. The report also found Scotland's female labour force participation rate rose to 75% in 2023, an increase of 0.1% on the previous year. Gillian Alexander, partner at PwC Scotland, said, "Scotland's sustained success in the Women in Work Index is a testament to a proactive approach in addressing gender workplace inequalities. The significant reduction in the gender pay gap and Scotland's strong labour force participation rate highlight the positive impact of policies aimed at fostering inclusive work environments. However, regional disparities across the UK indicate that more must be done to ensure women in all parts of the country have equal opportunities to thrive in the workforce. While Scotland was found to have progressed, other parts of the UK experienced widening disparities in terms of women in work. The north east of England saw the most significant improvement, jumping 6 places to 4th for the whole index, which is comprised of 12 regions. The east of England experienced the largest decline, dropping 5 places down to 8th place. According to data, the UK as a whole has slipped from 17th to 18th place in the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development rankings, reflecting sluggish progress compared to international counterparts. This was said to be mainly due to worsening female unemployment rates and an increasing participation gap. Iceland is first on the index, followed by New Zealand and Luxembourg. PwC says increasing the female workforce since 2011 has helped contribute an additional £6.2 billion in GDP per annum to the UK economy. It advised policymakers and businesses to continue to implement strategies that will enable women to fully participate in the workforce. Philippa O'Connor, Chief People Officer at PwC UK, said, "The positive link between gender equality in the workplace and economic growth shows that investing in gender equality isn't just the right thing to do, it's a smart thing to do. The benefits of a larger and more diverse workforce are translating directly into GDP gains, as well as enriching economic diversity, reducing income inequality, and providing a stronger overall skills base. As our research shows, increasing the workplace participation rates of women has the potential to significantly boost the UK economy and help solve the productivity puzzle, providing a valuable pathway to achieving sustainable growth." Employment Minister Tom Arthur said, "Scotland continues to have a lower gender pay gap than the UK, but we recognise that more needs to be done. Fair pay and fair and secure work for women is vital to this government's mission to eradicate child poverty and get the economy firing on all cylinders. While the employment law is reserved, we are taking action through our Fair Work approach to reduce barriers for women to access, remain in and progress in work and reduce the gender pay gap." And that article was written by Steph Braun and read by me, Ian.
From The National, Tuesday the 4th of March 2025, from the news section. A9 closed in both directions after lorry fire. Article written by Laura Pollock. The A9 has closed in both directions after a lorry burst into flames this afternoon. Emergency services were alerted at around 2:40 p.m. on Tuesday and are in attendance. There have been no reports of any injuries, and the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service have deployed 3 appliances to the scene. One eyewitness reported a toxic smell of burning plastic on the road. A statement from Police Scotland said, "The A9 is closed in both directions between Broxton Roundabout and Tibbermore Junction near Perth, following a report of a lorry fire around 2:40 p.m. on Tuesday, 4th of March 2025. There are no reports of any injuries, and emergency services are in attendance." A Scottish Fire and Rescue Service spokesperson said, "We were alerted at 2:15 p.m. on Tuesday, March 4th, to reports of a lorry fire on the A9 southbound. Operations Control mobilised 3 appliances to the scene near Broxton, where firefighters are working to extinguish the fire. There are no reported casualties." And that article was written by Laura Pollock. From The National, Tuesday the 4th of March 2025, from the news section. Lynx spotted in southern Scotland sparking official search. Article written by Lucy Jackson. A search is underway after a potential lynx sighting in Dumfries and Galloway. The wild cat was reportedly spotted in a wooded area near Newton Stewart at around 12 p.m. on February 26th. Police were made aware of the sighting 2 days later and are investigating to establish the full circumstances. Those who believe they may have seen a lynx in the area have been urged to get in touch with the emergency services. A Police Scotland spokesperson said, "We are aware of a possible sighting of a lynx in woodland near Newton Stewart around 12 p.m. on Wednesday, February 26, 2025. The sighting was reported to police on Friday, February 28th, and officers are working with partners to establish the full circumstances. If there are any further sightings, members of the public are asked not to approach the animal and contact Police Scotland via 101, quoting incident 0972 of February 28th. The potential sighting comes after 4 lynx were illegally released into the Highlands in January, in 2 separate incidents. The animals were captured by staff from the Royal Zoological Society of Scotland, before being relocated to Edinburgh Zoo with the hopes of finding them a new home. One of the lynx passed away just days after arriving in Edinburgh. Following those releases, First Minister John Swinney ruled out the Scottish Government's support for the legal release of lynx or other large carnivores in Scotland. And that article was written by Lucy Jackson. From The National, Tuesday the 4th of March 2025, from the news section. Man caught with cocaine at Scottish airport claims he only had sombreros. Article written by Lucy Jackson. A man who smuggled cocaine worth £5 million from Mexico to a Scottish airport claimed that the only items he acquired on his trip were sombreros. Christopher Purvis flew into Edinburgh Airport on July 24th last year and was stopped by a border force officer as he went through the green Nothing to Declare channel at the arrivals hall. The 35-year-old and his companion each had a large black suitcase, and he was also carrying a plastic bag containing 4 multicoloured traditional Mexican sombreros. The accused told the officer that they had come from Mexico, where they had been since June 30th, 2024. Advocate Depute Brian Gill KC told the High Court in Edinburgh. Purvis said that the suitcase and bag were his. He had packed them and was not carrying any items for anyone else. He confirmed that he was also aware it was prohibited to bring controlled drugs into the UK. The prosecutor said, he said that the only things that he had acquired in Mexico was the sombreros. The border force officer searched Purvis's suitcase and found 8 vacuum-sealed plastic packages. When one of them was cut into, it was found to contain a further sealed package covered in a foul-smelling yellow liquid, which appeared to be a mustard, and inside it was cocaine. Purvis was cautioned and replied, "It's all mine. My mate had nothing to do with it. I put it in his case." He was arrested and responded, "Yeah, all right, I understand. I'm useless and stupid and I'm effed anyway." Another officer searched his travelling companion's case and found a further 7 packages containing the Class A drug. The 15 packages recovered were each found to contain about 3 kilos of cocaine, which had a purity of 52% pure. The maximum street value of the total haul was up to £5,640,000. Purvis, formerly of Man Crescent, Merton, County Durham, was found to have flown from Mexico City Airport to Edinburgh via a stopover at Paris Charles de Gaulle Airport. Purvis admitted being concerned in the supply of cocaine at Edinburgh Airport on July 24th last year, and being concerned in the fraudulent evasion of the ban on importing controlled drugs on the same date, when he appeared in court on Tuesday. Defence solicitor advocate Ewan Roy said that as Purvis was a first offender, a background report would be required on him ahead of sentencing. The judge, Lord Somers, deferred sentence on Purvis, who followed the proceedings via a TV link to Edinburgh Prison for the preparation of the report. And that article was written by Lucy Jackson. From The National, Tuesday the 4th of March 2025, from the news section. Scottish councillors go against demolishing local hotel. Article written by Marie Sharp. The fate of a hotel in North Berwick will be put before Scottish ministers after East Lothian councillors went against recommendations to approve its demolition. The Golf Hotel closed commercially in 2006 and had been used by its owners for staff accommodation until it was bought by Caledonian Heritable during the pandemic. Plans to demolish the building and build 14 flats on the site, on Durleton Avenue, were recommended for refusal by planning officers with dozens of local objections. A Tuesday meeting of East Lothian's Council's Planning Committee overturned the advice to refuse permission to demolish the building and a separate application for the new flats. Both applications will now be continued for final approval after the committee was told a BAT survey was required on site before the go-ahead could be given. Councillors were told the demolition of the building in North Berwick's conservation area will have to be referred to Scottish ministers after national body Historic Environment Scotland objected to the work. The meeting heard that the former hotel had initially been a house for a single family, who used it as a holiday home, even bringing their own cattle with them so the children did not have to drink local milk. Caledonian Brewery bought the building in 2021 and applied for permission to demolish it and build 14 luxury flats on the site. Objectors to the demolition said the building should be given listed status and was an important part of the town's conservation area. However, councillors voted by 6 votes to 4 to reject the officer's recommendation to refuse permission for the demolition. Separately, councillors voted against officer recommendations to refuse permission for the new flats, which will now come back to committee for formal approval once the BAT survey is carried out. And that article was written by Marie Sharp. From The National, Tuesday the 4th of March 2025 from the news section. Scottish Museum incorporated into US schools curriculum. Article written by Paul Kelly. A Scottish museum has developed ties with schools in a US state, it has emerged. The Great Tapestry of Scotland Museum in Galashiels has been officially incorporated into the school curriculum in Wisconsin. This is regarded as a significant milestone in our international outreach, and as part of the partnership, the museum will receive 3 visits per year from students and educators. One of the Wisconsin visitors left feedback to say, "This exhibit was the best visual representation of Scotland that I have seen since my arrival. It allowed me to understand Scottish history better than any book or documentary." The link-up was welcomed by Councillor Ewan Jardine, the leader of Scottish Borders Council, at a meeting of the External Services /Providers Monitoring Group. Jardine, Scottish Conservatives councillor for Galashiels and District, said, "I think the Wisconsin link is a great news, and it's the first I've heard of it, and I just wonder if there is any way we could tie into Wisconsin on a sporting theme. Wisconsin is the home of the Green Bay Packers football team. Is that something we could bring into schools?" In response, Graham McMurdo, Strategic Programme Manager at Live Borders, said, "Yes, if that link is there, well, why not maximise the benefit of that?" And that article was written by Paul Kelly.
This is from The National on Tuesday the 4th of March 2025, from the comments section. Control over energy is still the key to independence. This article is by Kenny McCaskill. The National's week-long exposé of Scotland's extraordinary energy bounty is to be applauded. The disgrace of its being hidden from the Scottish people, and yet the wealth and opportunity it still affords our land. It's now about how parties and individuals in Scotland supporting independence take it forward. For me, energy is what makes the case for Scottish independence. It's absurd that an energy-rich nation should see almost half its population enduring fuel poverty. It's also perverse that a major oil-producing land should be seeing its refinery close and its offshore bounty being shut down, when war-ravaged Syria will be ramping up production. The cataclysm of the announced closure of Grangemouth refinery has been followed not just by redundancies there, but at other sites. This is just the beginning of yet another deindustrialisation of a vital sector of Scotland's economy, with the devastation that follows for communities across our country. The funding commitments for alternative industries and work are paltry. The Labour government's pledge of $200 million is nowhere near what's needed. It's also only a third of the credit line being offered to Petro Ineos for a new site in Antwerp. Not only is Scotland only worth a third of what they've offered in a foreign country, but that third is also dependent on 3 times it being leveraged from the private sector. From whom and for what springs to mind, with conspiracy theories beginning to abound, with the site forming part of the 4th Freeport. But despite all those tales of woe, energy remains the key. Folk can see turbines turning on and offshore from their houses, but cannot afford to heat their homes. Many in those households are crying out for work or desperate for a skilled job for their son or daughter. And yet the contracts are going south or abroad. Scots as ever having to leave their native land in search of employment. The wealth from renewables is able to transform our land and immeasurably improve the quality of life for our people, just as oil wealth has done for Norway and should have done for Scotland. Yet just recently a Scottish Government minister lauded the opening of a $2.5 billion subsea cable taking Scotland's renewable wealth south. But for what revenue, as there was none? With what work or business being created or even cheap energy being provided? They were absent. Pennies being thrown at local communities is, as the proclaimers would sing, going cap in hand and begging for a piece of what's already ours. It's why energy remains key, and to unlock that wealth and let our land flourish, independence is essential. Without it, we will simply be a resource to be exploited, the environment to be devastated, whether with pylons or battery storage units, all to allow it to be transmitted south. Our economy, meanwhile, to be trashed and denied the growth that should be springing from this great bounty. So independence is key, but it's the how and the why we need to get out there to the Scottish public. Of course, independence is polling well, whether slightly ahead or a tad behind, but we need to explain how we can get it and why we need it. Speaking to many young folk, especially those involved in the current energy struggles, it's clear that almost to a man and woman they voted yes in 2014. Many were very active, out on the doors seeking that change our country needed. If asked now, they'd still say they support independence. The problem is that they neither see how it can be achieved nor why it's essential. Their answer to a pollster is the same as if they'd been asked, would they like a white Christmas, a hot summer, or Scotland to win the World Cup? A nice thing to happen, but all in the abstract, and for them just not on the agenda. We can debate why that has happened. Failure to use mandates, depressing the yes movement, or whatever. But at the end of the day, we need to find a way forward and not analyse the past. That's where the how comes in. With a referendum closed down by the UK, it's essential that Holyrood 2026 is used as a plebiscite election, making it clear that a vote is a mandate for independence. Not a polite request only to be rudely rebuffed by Westminster, nor even a shouted demand, but failing to follow through with any action when ignored. Instead, it must be no ifs or buts, a vote for independence in 2026 is the mandate to negotiate our freedom. The why takes us back to energy and those discussions with young shop stewards. Independence has to be explained as absolutely critical to our society and economy. It's not a constitutional abstract or just a nice thing that might be good to have someday. It's essential to preserving the industrial base that we have and building the new industrial one that we require. It's equally essential to transforming our society, where high energy costs are crippling our economy under Labour, as the high pound once did under Thatcher. It's essential to address the poverty through high fuel costs that impact so many. It's not just those in fuel poverty that are the issue, but those tottering near it, and whose lives are affected by it, even if their home can be heated. That's why energy is the key to independence, making the need for it real and tangible, not just a nice thing to have someday. But we also need to explain the how and why. To those who wonder how after the folly of the Supreme Court venture, it's back on the table next May. The closure of Grangemouth refinery, the ending of the winter fuel allowance, and the cabling of our renewable resource south show to those who wonder why. And that article was written by Kenny McCaskill and read by Lynn McNeil. This is from The National on Tuesday the 4th of March 2025 from the Culture section. Actor and Holocaust survivor attend police station over Gaza march. This article is by James Walker. The Crown star Khalid Abdallah and an 87-year-old Holocaust survivor have been summoned to attend a formal interview by the Metropolitan Police in relation to a pro-Palestinian protest, he said. The actor, who played Dodi Al-Fayed in the series, posted on Instagram to say he and others had been asked to attend an interview in relation to the protest on January 18th, and it remains to be seen if this will result in charges. January's Palestine Solidarity Campaign protest, PSC, was adjusted to be a static rally after police curtailed organisers' plans for a march past the BBC and near a synagogue. But a large group marched towards Trafalgar Square from Whitehall after speeches were made at the rally. Abdallah posted on his Instagram on Monday saying, "On Thursday, alongside others, including Stephen Kapos, an 87-year-old Holocaust survivor, I received a letter from the Metropolitan Police summoning me to attend a formal interview in relation to the Palestine Solidarity Campaign protest of January the 18th. It remains to be seen if this will result in charges. I've expressed my feelings on the experience of that day on previous posts available online. He added, "The right to protest is under attack in this country, and it requires us all to defend it." A Metropolitan Police spokesman said, "As part of our ongoing investigation into alleged breaches of Public Order Act conditions on Saturday, January 18th, we have invited a further 8 people to be interviewed under caution at a police station. While we are aware of names being attributed to those who have been invited for interview, we do not confirm the identity of anyone under investigation." And that article was written by James Walker and read by Lynn McNeil.
The National News on Wednesday the 5th of March. Council tax in Orkney to rise by 15%. An article written by Lucy Jackson. Councillors in Orkney have confirmed a 15% rise in council tax. The motion passed by 15 votes to 6 at a full council meeting on Tuesday. It's the biggest increase in the levy in Scotland, as councils across the country opt for the largest rises in decades. A nationwide freeze on the levy ends in April, meaning that local authorities can increase it by however much they like. Last week, we told how councillors discussed how big a rise they should propose. The elected members discussed the local authority's long-term financial strategy, which included the aim to bring the island's council tax in line with the Scottish average. A survey conducted ahead of this year's council tax decision showed that 47% of respondents were in favour of higher council tax increases to protect community services. Last year, the local authority said it would need to increase council tax by 10%, but the levy was frozen after receiving additional funding from the Scottish Government at the last minute. An article written by Lucy Jackson. The National News on Wednesday the 5th of March. Johal cleared in one case but could still face the death penalty. An article written by Hamish Morrison. A Scottish Sikh detained in India for 7 years has been acquitted in one case against him, though he still faces the threat of the death penalty. Dumbarton man Jagtar Singh Johal has been cleared of terrorist charges by a court in Punjab, but still faces either other essentially duplicate cases, with the most severe penalty being execution. Johal, also known as Jaggi, faces accusations that he funded a terrorist plot which resulted in a series of attacks in Punjab, a state in northwest India, in 2016 and 2017. The court rejected the arguments with the human rights charity Reprieve, saying that prosecutors had failed to provide any credible evidence to support their claims that he had transferred money to terrorists. The anti-death penalty charity has said that the Indian National Investigation Agency's cases against Johal are based on a confession that he wrote after being tortured by police officers who electrocuted him and threatened to set him on fire. Johal's brother, Gurpreet Singh Johal, said that the Punjabi court's verdict proved that the charges against his brother were baseless and that the case was exposed as a fabrication. His supporters have long held that Johal faces religious persecution in India because he is Sikh. He added, Jagtar has not been able to hug his wife for 7 years. All this time, he's been locked up in an Indian jail for something he didn't do. I will only believe this nightmare is over when he's here with us at home, but today feels like a significant moment. Surely the UK government recognises that this injustice cannot continue. Johal's MP, Douglas McAllister, said, "The government must act now to secure Jagtar's release. This is a unique opportunity to secure a resolution with the Indian authorities and bring this young British man back to his family. Without decisive diplomatic action, he faces being imprisoned for decades while the remaining trials drag on, despite the complete lack of credible evidence against him." Reprieve Deputy Executive Director Dan Dolan said, "For Jagtar to remain imprisoned and facing a death sentence after this acquittal would be a mockery of justice. The 8 essentially duplicate cases against him flagrantly violate the double jeopardy principle, which protects people from being put on trial twice for the same crime and is enshrined in both international law and India's constitution. An article written by Hamish Morrison. The National News on Wednesday the 5th of March. Major railway line to be closed for several weekends for vital works. An article written by Alistair Ferguson. A major railway line will be closed for several weekends, with a replacement bus service in place as vital improvement work is carried out. The cross-border West Coast Main Line service will face disruption at Carlisle due to a series of weekend engineering works by Network Rail this spring. Engineers will be working on both sides of the border in order to install signalling upgrades and to make improvements to the track. Teams in Scotland will carry out track renewal, drainage improvements and infrastructure maintenance works at locations between Carstairs and the border across weekends from Sunday, March the 30th until Sunday, June the 8th. Buses will replace trains from Carlisle to Glasgow and Edinburgh during the scheduled work. Ross Moran, Network Rail Scotland's route director, said that the work can only be carried out by closing the line, but once completed it will provide a more reliable railway for passengers. He said, "Our engineers will be working hard to deliver these improvement projects as quickly as possible for our customers. The work we're undertaking is vital to the long-term future of the line and will help to provide a more reliable railway for our passengers and freight customers. The complexity of the engineering work being completed means that it can only be done by closing the line, and we're urging passengers planning to travel on the West Coast Main Line over this period to check their journey in advance." Chris Liptrot, Operations Director at Avanti West Coast, added that he would strongly advise passengers to plan their journey ahead of time while the work is being carried out. He said, "This closure of the West Coast Main Line north of Carlisle will enable Network Rail to carry out planned renewal work to make the railway more reliable. During this time, there'll be no direct trains to or from Glasgow and Edinburgh, and as a result, we'll be operating a reduced timetable north of Carlisle. Rail replacement services will also be in place. We'd like to thank our customers for their patience and strongly advise that they plan their journey, as well as to check the Avanti West Coast website for the latest updates before travelling." An article written by Alistair Ferguson.
This is a column taken from the opinion pages of The National, published on Wednesday, the 5th of March. It's written by Seamus Logan. Trump's attack on Zelensky was a premeditated ambush. When the news broke about Ukraine, it was no less stark for being expected. "We are pausing and reviewing our aid to ensure that it is contributing to a solution," said the overnight statement from the White House. And at midnight US time yesterday, in a move which will only make everyone concerned much poorer, 25% tariffs were placed by the United States on a range of Canadian and Mexican goods. With friends like these, who needs enemies? It speaks volumes that Donald Trump is apparently so abhorred by the war in Ukraine that he would cut off further US contributions as a means of bringing it to an end at any cost, yet refuse to do the same to bring the Israeli government to the negotiating table over the conflict in Gaza. It was nauseating to see the so-called leader of the free world and his vice president bully and intimidate an honorable and courageous man like Volodymyr Zelensky, who rather mildly tried to set out how previous agreements had been dishonored by Vladimir Putin and why this meant that any peace agreement for Ukraine should be underwritten with security guarantees. Perhaps, like me, you watched the entire meeting so that you could form your own view on how the clash developed. If you had, you'd have noted that it was only the final 10 minutes that went wrong, and that the previous 40 minutes were, to all outward appearances, fairly normal. If it looked like a premeditated ambush, that's almost certainly because it was. President Trump had greeted his guest by commenting sarcastically on his attire. This was then picked up by a journalist in the same vein, who wondered why President Zelensky wasn't wearing a suit. The journalist in question was Brian Glenn, a right-wing writer and commentator, reportedly in a relationship with Georgia Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, well known for her support of Trump. Trump then winked at Mr. Glenn, in a manner suggesting that the question had been planted. After Vice President J.D. Vance weighed in, as it looked like he had tried to do previously with Keir Starmer over free speech, it all went downhill. It seems clear that President Zelensky could have kissed the ring and smiled serenely throughout, only for some aspect of his demeanor to still be seized upon as the trigger for the cowardly assault that followed. I don't recall Churchill in 1941, prior to Pearl Harbor, being criticized by the White House for his war dress, his allegedly insufficient gratitude, or for not trying hard enough to reach a settlement with Hitler. Trump's claims that Mr. Zelensky, a man leading the defense of his country in an unprovoked war, somehow either wanted the war to start or does not want that war to end is the most grotesque kind of gaslighting imaginable. What we saw in action were the brittle egos of a president and vice president, both infinitely smaller in character and vision than the circumstances they face. But even if it is all just a bit of theatre, a clever game of 3D chess that we lesser mortals have failed to grasp, it's simply about making Europe increase its own military capabilities. Trump's undermining of previous certainties matters for another reason. Starmer's plans for supporting Ukraine going forward depend on achieving a UK-US special relationship-based security guarantee to underpin any European military deployment as the basis of a lasting peace deal in Ukraine. That is not an unreasonable aspiration, but it rests on the very shaky assumption that Trump will deliver even on that. Trump has an all too appreciative audience back home, who want to believe, whatever the reality, that the rest of the world has been leeching off the US in some way, and taking it for granted for too long. It's an easy vein of grievance to try and mine for electoral gain, and mine it he has with gusto. So I pose the question, with a British foreign policy if Trump decides to follow an isolationist approach akin to Roosevelt in 1939. The similarities of then and now are disturbing. There was significant support for Hitler in the USA in the late 1930s, not unlike the right-wing agenda so popular in the USA today. Back in the day, some Americans regarded Europe as not an American problem. Many felt that the USA should not get involved in what they saw as an essentially foreign war. Can his chest thumping about a desire to avoid further deaths be taken at face value? Why is a minerals deal being placed center stage and regarded as sufficient in terms of bringing about a peace agreement? Call me cynical if you like, but could it be that a certain Elon Musk hopes to benefit commercially from such an arrangement and that the future independence of Ukraine is simply something to be paid lip service to in pursuit of that objective? The only language Trump understands, when he allows anyone else a word in edgeways, is strength. So whatever diplomatic politesse Mr. Starmer feels he must offer in public, let us hope that the discussion in private is crystal clear. Namely, that Ukraine's security is Europe's security, and that Europe's security is ultimately America's security also. Can a state visit go ahead in the absence of support for Ukraine to negotiate a stable peace? And will there be support for a rare minerals deal between the USA and Ukraine if Europe is left to support Ukraine alone? These are now burning questions. Let's hope that Mr. Starmer's smartest guys in the room, over at the Foreign Office, have a plan B that is more about our European allies than it is about unreliable friends in the White House. Time will tell, but suddenly, the world seems to be a much more dangerous place. That column was written by Seamus Logan.
This is an article taken from the news pages of The National, published on Wednesday, the 5th of March. It's written by James Walker. Over 200 petitions launched to stop Donald Trump visiting Scotland. A wave of public opposition to Donald Trump's invitation to visit Scotland has emerged on Change.org, with 237 new petitions since Friday, demanding that the US president's invitation be rescinded. It comes after Trump's clash with his Ukrainian counterpart Volodymyr Zelensky in the White House last week, which has been followed by the US leader pausing military aid to Ukraine. Last Thursday, Keir Starmer publicly presented President Trump with an invitation from the King for an unprecedented second state visit to the UK. But Mr. Trump's meeting with the Ukrainian president the following day descended into a bitter argument, which resulted in much condemnation. The Prime Minister has already rejected calls from the SNP for Trump's state visit invitation to be cancelled, but over 200 petition starters on Change.org argue that the US president's stance on Ukraine, his apparent alignment with Russia and Vladimir Putin, and both his and his Vice President J.D. Vance's treatment of Zelensky in the Oval Office on Friday, make the visit unjustifiable. By contrast, there was only one petition in favor of the state visit still going ahead. One petition organizer calling for the state visit to be cancelled was Gordon Pearson, who writes, "The invitation to Trump was a way to help draw him back into the Western alliance. Trump has shown that he stands more with Putin and behaved like a cheap gangster towards President Zelensky. Another petition organizer, Dave Barron Robinson, even threatened to hand back his military medals if Trump's visit goes ahead. I devoted 32 years of my life serving the Queen and this great nation as a submariner. I have been awarded 4 medals of which I am rightly proud, he said. However, I will not be able to wear my medals with pride if our monarch succumbs to Trump. If the state visit goes ahead prior to an acceptable peace deal, I intend to return my medals to His Majesty. Nick Boulding's petition, which has over 32,000 signatures, was motivated by the prospect of taxpayer money going to a Trump state visit. He writes, "The use of public funding to host a figure who has shown questionable attitudes towards the ongoing war in Ukraine feels like a disregard of public sentiment. It's worth noting that each state visit by a US president tends to cost British taxpayers millions of pounds, an expense I believe isn't justifiable for an individual whose actions and attitudes repeatedly clash with our nation's values." Nick Mitchell, head of UK at change.org, commented, "It's rare that we see hundreds of petitions launched on the same issue on change.org within the space of 72 hours. The first petitions calling for the state visit to be cancelled emerged on Friday night, as the world watched events unfold at the White House in real time, and the wave of opposition to a Trump state visit has continued over the following days, showing the strength of feeling among the British public." That article was written by James Walker.
The National. Politics on Wednesday the 5th of March. Scottish Government hits out as levelling up cash bypasses devolution. An article written by Laura Pollock and Hamish Morrison. New levelling up style funding for Scottish towns would have a greater impact if invested through the Scottish Government, a spokesperson has said. While the Scottish Government has welcomed the funding, the package is deemed politically contentious because the funding goes over the head of the devolved governments, which is meant to allocate funding for local councils. The cash, up to £20 million for 10 Scottish towns, will be spent on regenerating high streets, parks and other cornerstones of local communities. The scheme follows on from the long-term plan for towns under Rishi Sunak's government, which had similarly pledged funding for the same areas across Britain and Northern Ireland. Under the plan for neighbourhoods, the selected areas will all be handed up to £20 million each and will have a local board set up, comprised of residents, businesses and campaigners, who will get to decide how the money is used, according to the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. The Scottish towns which will get the money are Arbroath, Elgin, the Orkney Islands, Peterhead, Dumfries, Irvine, Kilmarnock, Clydebank, Coatbridge and Greenock. Of these, 6 are in seats currently represented by Labour in Westminster. There are 75 areas that have been selected to get the money over the next decade. Boards will decide how the money is spent, with Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner saying that locals would be put in the driving seat of their potential, having control of where the Whitehall cash goes. A Scottish Government spokesperson said, while it's welcome that this commitment made by the previous UK Government to 10 towns in Scotland has been honoured, we have been clear that the funding would have greater impact if invested through the Scottish Government's well-established mechanisms. This funding was formerly known as the Long-Term Plan for Towns programme under the previous UK Government, of which some work is already underway. We will continue to work to ensure that it meets Scotland's needs. Scottish Secretary Ian Murray said, in this new era of partnership working as part of our ongoing resetting of relations, we will continue to respect the devolution settlement and strengthen collaboration with the Scottish Government and local partners to ensure that this investment has maximum transformational impact on communities. An article written by Laura Pollock and Hamish Morrison.
This is an article taken from the news pages of The National, published on Wednesday, the 5th of March. It's written by John Coulter. Scottish man creates brilliant website to bankrupt Trump. A Scottish man has created a website that provides alternatives to US and Russian-made products and services. The so-called bankrupt Trump website is being advertised on Reddit as a response to the US president's actions over the past few weeks. The founder, a man who says he's from Fife, wrote, "Trump is a FUD. I made a website so you can buy less US stuff. Following US President Donald Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance's government's decision to halt aid to Ukraine, the Scot created the service that allows visitors to type in their usual product and be provided with alternatives that originate from outside the US and Russia. The website also includes a donation portal to support Ukraine. The website's pledge reads, "Bankrupt Trump was founded in response to alarming developments in international politics that have raised serious concerns about global security. Our movement emerged after it was reported that the US had restricted arms shipments to Ukraine, a decision that many argue has left the world more vulnerable in these uncertain times. Our mission is to offer ethical alternatives for conscious consumers, particularly in the UK, the EU, and across the globe. By empowering individuals to make informed choices that align with their values, we hope to pave the way for a safer and more transparent world." It goes on, "We are a community of engaged citizens, dedicated to accountability, transparency, and responsible decision-making." Following the US having halted aid to Ukraine, J.D. Vance reiterated his stance on Ukraine and was accused of besmirching Europe's ability to defend the nation. If you want real security guarantees, if you want to actually ensure that Vladimir Putin does not invade Ukraine again, the very best security guarantee is to give Americans the economic upside in the future of Ukraine. That is a way better security guarantee than 20,000 troops from some random country that hasn't fought a war in 30 or 40 years. Mr. Vance responded to the accusations as absurdly dishonest. Boycotts of US products have become a popular means of protest for Canadians, after Trump's comments regarding their potential annexation, and social media support for a European protest of US goods, has garnered attention in the past week. To visit the website, go to www.bankrupttrump.org. That article was written by John Coulter.
The National. Politics, on Wednesday the 5th of March. Scottish Tories slated for Dickensian plans to lower the school leaving age to 14. An article written by Lucy Jackson. The Scottish Tories have been slated over Dickensian proposals to lower the school leaving age to as young as 14. Party leader Russell Findlay is set to propose the policy on Wednesday in a speech to mark Apprenticeship Week. The policy would see youngsters allowed to leave school as young as 14, but required to go on to either an apprenticeship or college. The leaving age in Scotland has been 16 for decades, and the last time it was 14 was more than 100 years ago, in 1901. Yet Mr. Findlay is set to claim that the change could transform opportunities for those young people who are being left behind. He's expected to say too many young people become trapped in a system that isn't working for them. Even worse, far too many exit from it altogether. This is not about writing off these young people, it's the very opposite of that. It's about guiding each individual into the path best suited to their aspirations. It's about giving young people an opportunity to continue in a form of hybrid education that is better suited to their talents. Upon leaving school at 15, maybe even 14, they would still be required to stay in education, but it would be a form of education that works for them. A fast track to opportunity, whether college or an apprenticeship. By developing our proposal hand in hand with businesses, we could make Scotland's economy fit for the future. Scottish Greens education spokesperson Ross Greer said that the Scottish Tories' proposals would put many young people at a major disadvantage. Mr. Greer told The National, "A young person leaving school before they take their first SQA qualifications risks many already disadvantaged pupils ending up with no qualifications at all. We should not want to replicate the stigma which exists for those who did not graduate from high school in countries like America. Leaving school this early would almost certainly worsen the attainment gap between the richest and the poorest communities. And that's before you think about the important life skills like financial management, sex and relationships education, and how to apply for jobs, which should be covered in the second half of high school. Missing out on those would put many young people at a major disadvantage." Mr. Greer added, offering more vocational qualifications in school and building closer relationships between high schools and colleges is a better way to make sure that every young person gets an education which works for them. The Scottish Government could start this work by implementing the Hayward Review in full and moving away from our Victorian-era exam system. Meanwhile, Education Secretary Jenny Gilruth said that the proposals were Dickensian and that the Scottish Government did not agree with them. Commenting, Ms Gilruth said these reckless plans were proposed by the Scottish Tories in 2011 and were soundly rejected by the Scottish people. The Tories should say what they mean. They want to see working-class children leave school at 14 and leave academic pursuits to the middle and upper class. That is not an approach that this government will agree with. We will continue to take action to ensure that every child in Scotland, no matter their background, has the opportunity to succeed in whichever path they choose. That's why we're already seeing record numbers of vocational qualifications earned by pupils in our schools, and record numbers of Scottish students accepted at university. Ms Gilruth pointed towards the fact that the last time the school leaving age was changed to 14 in Scotland was more than a century ago. She continued, Tory values may be rooted in the Victorian era, but we will not allow them to drag our education into a bygone age with this Dickensian policy. As ever, what is common sense to the Tories makes no sense to anyone else. An article written by Lucy Jackson.
This is from The National on Thursday, 6th March 2025, from the Culture section. Dinosaur fossil extracted from cliff in Scottish Island, by James Walker. A fossil first spotted in a Scottish island over 50 years ago has finally been extracted from the base of the cliff where it was found and, following analysis, formally identified as a Jurassic dinosaur. The fossil was first discovered in Skye in 1973, making it Scotland's earliest recorded dinosaur find. It was not fully identified at the time and remained uncollected until a team led by Dr. Elsa Pankirali returned in 2018 to the location near Elgol in the south of the island to undertake a challenging extraction from the rock. While the Elgol dinosaur is preserved only in fragments compared to some specimens found elsewhere, researchers have identified part of the spine, ribs and hip bones, making it the most complete dinosaur skeleton found to date in Scotland. Close study of these bones has led researchers to believe that it is an ornithopod dinosaur, a group of which includes notable later dinosaurs such as Iguanodon, Parasaurolophus and Edmontosaurus. The Elgol dinosaur dates to around 166 million years ago in the Middle Jurassic, making it one of the earliest known ornithopod body fossils, as that group of dinosaurs became far more prominent in the later Cretaceous period. Analysis of the bone structure indicates that the animal, which would have been roughly the size of a pony, was at least 8 years old. The new description of the Elgol dinosaur is published in the Earth and Environmental Science Transactions of the Royal Society of Edinburgh. Lead author, Dr. Elsa Pankirali, the NERC Independent Research Fellow at National Museums Scotland, said, "This was a really challenging extraction. In fact, we'd previously felt it was too difficult to collect the fossil. But I thought it was really important to study it. I was able to persuade the team to try. It took a lot of hard work from a lot of people, but we did it. Finally, we can confirm and publish Scotland's first recorded and most complete dinosaur, and that makes it all worthwhile." The difficult excavation was made possible with the support of a specialist team from Research Casting International, based in Canada. A local crew from Elgol's Bella Jane boat trips piloted the rigid inflatable boat and dinghy to the shore at the foot of the cliff, where the specimen was loaded and taken back to port. Dr. Stig Walsh from the National Museum Scotland added, "This is a wonderful addition to the rapidly growing set of Jurassic finds from the Isle of Skye, which are enabling us to learn more and more about the rich ecosystem of the time. We've known there were dinosaurs there for a while, most obviously from the famous footprints at Ancorn, Brothers Point and Duntulm, and from individual bones. But it's exciting to see a more complete, if still partial, skeleton. We are delighted to add it to the other amazing finds now in the National Collection." Other recent Jurassic discoveries from Skye include the description of adult and juvenile mammals of the same species, Chrysotodon, which revealed that these mammals grew more slowly than mammals today, and the world's biggest Jurassic pterosaur fossil, Dark Skiernath. That article was by James Walker. This is from The National on Thursday, 6th March 2025. From the Culture section. Google AI claims haggis is a real animal in embarrassing blunder. By John Coulter. Google's experimental AI service has been caught out for telling web users that traditional Scottish dish of haggis is in fact a Highland animal. When Google was posited with the question, "Is haggis an animal?" its built-in AI overview would answer, "Yes, a haggis is a small furry mammal native to Scotland," and proceed to give a description of the fictional creature. According to AI, which has come under previous criticism for its inaccuracy, the haggis is known for its distinctive asymmetrical legs and is a small, rotund animal with fur that resembles a cross between a rabbit and a squirrel. The AI mistaking the iconic dish as originating from a real animal rather than minced sheep cooked in casing is thought to be down to Scots' efforts to trick foreigners into believing the existence of the mythological creature from Scottish folklore. Over the years, a cheeky campaign has utilised AI imagery of the furry folklore animal, with some TikToks even being accompanied by an AI David Attenborough narration to fully sell the legitimacy of the animal's existence. The campaign seemed to trick many non-Scots and apparently Google's AI system too. Since the AI draws its answers from across the web, the deluge of haggis hoax content is likely to be the cause for Google's mistake. The story of the AI's confusion went viral on Reddit, though it would now appear that the AI has righted its mistake, despite Reddit's users' attempts to keep the blunder online. One user commented, "Remember to give it a thumbs up at the bottom of the AI summary so that it knows this is correct and factual information." The Haggis Wildlife Foundation, a gag site set up around promoting the haggis's existence, has articles, videos and even merchandise that can lead unwitting foreigners to believe the myth to be true. Incredulous comments appeared all over TikTok due to the campaign, with one user commenting, "I didn't even know that these animals existed." Although it's not for certain where the myth of the haggis originated, the foreign population's capacity to be duped by online hoaxes about its existence could stem from the fact that the dish has been illegal in the US since 1971 due to its containing of a sheep's lung. That article was by John Coulter.
That concludes this week's edition of the National Podcast. Please remember to subscribe to our channels at Pure Review and to tell your friends about our service.